Good evening, Southwest Church, wherever you are. So glad to have you. My name is Tim.
And I'm Natalie. We're so glad you're here with us at In the Word
with Ricky Jenkins.
With Ricky Jenkins.
With Natalie and Tim.
With Natalie and Tim, yes.
Thrilled that you've joined us wherever you are. Happy Wednesday to you. You know that when we get started, we actually love to hear from you. And we've got our clever way of asking two questions. Number one, what's your location? And number two, who are your compatriots? So please.
No, that's actually not how.
Is that how we said? That's how I read it on.
No,
right
that's
here.
not. It's
what's your 20 and
nope.
Who's on your 6?
No. Where you at? Who you with? Who you with? Where you at?
Oh, that's right.
Way cooler than any of the things you just said.
I don't know. 20.
There's even a song. Is
there a song? Do we got a song?
Oh, no song. No song. Oh my gosh, we're so fun without this.
Play us the intro video. Yes. Let's get started. Welcome to Wednesday in the Word.
God wants to teach you how to deal with the mess you got to go through now with respect to what you get to experience in God and Christ in an eternal heaven later. Southwest is safe for you. Welcome home.
All right, guys, we are here with Tim again. He is joining us on Wednesday in the Word with Ricky Jenkins. Ricky will be back with us next weekend, but we have the honor of Tim teaching us tonight. But we have some amazing things that are coming up soon in our near future that you've heard us talk about. Love Local CV is one of those.
Very
Super
exciting.
excited. We had a planning meeting today, and I can't even wait. I got to see all the songs that they're singing. I got to hear who the different worship teams are that are going to be joining us. We're going to have 14 different churches, and we'll have different worship leaders from each church that are going to be joining Kanji and our house band on stage. But more than all of the program side of it, it's what comes out of that.
Yeah. So you guys know that a few months ago, we hosted a special evening and we raised support to not only help Southwest Church advance through the pandemic, we helped a ton of people with a special event called Make Jesus Famous Now. Well, we were so impressed with the hearts of our people that we decided that we wanted to do a similar effort and help the Valley at large. And so we are doing a special night on May 1st on our Southwest campus that I believe we will live stream as well.
Yes, yep, we're live streaming as well.
We will live stream that. So if you're out of the area, you can catch that event Saturday night, May 1st. That night is going to kick off support that all 15 churches in total are going to express across the Valley. And here's something I'd love to say tonight. You should visit the website, lovelocalcv.com, lovelocalcv.com, and we need you to do one of two things. Number one, if you want to come to that event in person, we need an RSVP. If you're going to catch us on the live stream, don't worry about that. But the second thing we want to do is if you are a local business or part of a local small business here in the Valley, we want to advocate for you and we want to support you as well. So send your local small business owner to that website to register. We are cooperating with the Coachella Valley
Chamber of Commerce.
This is a very legitimate expression for the whole Valley. So
there's
check
even
out that
like
site.
windows. One of the cool things that they've been doing is putting like window stickers up on the different businesses around the Valley that are actually participating in this. And so as you're out shopping, you'll be able to know which places you can even support within this. So guys, join us on campus. Invite your friends. There's going to be local dignitaries here. There's going to be people from the community. There's going to be business owners. This is a way for us to show up and show out for our community, correct? Like to love them, support them. There's still a lot of hurting people. I know just so many restaurants and places that are just, they've been up and down with the pandemic. They've been open, they've been closed, they've been, you've got a lot of servers who have been out of work. And so this is just a way for us to bless them. And it's going to be amazing. So you'll hear more about it coming up for sure. All right, guys, questions. We love to answer your questions. So as Pastor Tim is teaching tonight, if you guys have questions on the passage, if you have questions from this past weekend on the message, if you just have any kind of biblical or theological question that you want to get answered, make sure that you text SW questions to 94000. There's also a QR code right there. It's kind of awkward probably with the QR code scanning it if you're watching it on your smartphone or on your tablet or whatever. But you can do any of those options. Make sure you send your questions in. We get them. They like literally pop up on a TV here and they're super fun for us to look at. So send us your questions. We'd love to answer those. All right. Highs and lows.
Okay.
What's your high for the day?
My high for the day is not the wind.
Oh, why has it been so windy this year?
I don't know.
So weird.
My high for the day is getting to do Wednesday in the Word with
Oh,
Natalie
so
Dawson.
good. That was your high last week too.
Easily the best part of my day.
Oh, your low was that I held grudges. I do.
You
I'm a grudge holder.
You do, but let's see if maybe I've got something up my sleeve tonight.
Oh, good. Okay, my low is not knowing what Tim has on his list. All right. We have a question of the day. And so we're kind of running out of questions. We kind of just like haphazardly talk through questions. So we have table topics, which is super fun. They're just cards. And so question of the day.
Okay.
If you lived to be 100.
Oh, help me, please, no.
If you lived to be 100 years old, would it be more important to have a sharp mind or a fit body? All right, guys, answer the question. If you live to be 100 years old, would you rather have a sharp mind or a fit body? I actually laughed out loud when I read this. I was like, oh.
I don't have that at 43.
Which one? You don't have what at 43?
No, yeah,
Neither?
Correct. C.
All of the above. Okay, but if you could have one of those, even at 43.
Oh, my gosh.
I would say sharp mind.
Yeah, I would say sharp mind.
I like, don't, if my mind goes, I want to go. Like, take me home, Jesus.
Yeah,
right?
I think I mean, like I said, I'm 43, and what am I going to do right now?
I know, but I'm serious. Like, guys, I hope people are answering this question. Sharp mind or a fit body.
They are. Hopping
Here
in.
we
Good.
go. They're
Hop in
hopping
on
in.
it,
Hop
y'all.
in, guys. Answer the question, which one you'd like to have. I mean, honestly, I don't know that I want to live to 100. I think that's like the other part, right? Like,
what about ultra wealthy? Is that option C? Like fit body, fit mind, or ultra wealthy?
no, it's none of those.
Dang it. All
Well,
right.
at 100, you don't care if you're ultra.
No, but I just pay for people to be smart and keep me fit. I just
So, like, you
hire
wouldn't
that
even know
out.
what was going on.
Hire
You
it
wouldn't even
out.
know if you had money.
Outsource it.
honestly. Oh, my
Outsource
gosh.
it.
All right, guys. Question of the day. These are fun questions. We actually do questions like this at our dinner table. A couple of times that we used to eat during the pandemic, we were like 7 days a week at a dinner table. Now we're back to like
sports
sports
are
and
back
everything.
and-
So a couple nights a week we do just fun questions at the dinner table, but we love them. So that's the heart of this. And we hope that you guys see the heart in that and you guys can ask some fun questions. So
Nat,
yeah.
you were here this weekend. Pastor Ricky kicked off a brand new series.
Yeah.
I'd love to know how that message hit you, both in the moment and as you've been processing all week.
All right. So we talked a little bit about this. We have a sermon text team where we kind of review the past week. And obviously, the new series and talking about what it looks like to neighbor like Jesus, so neighboring like Jesus, was such a great start of the series. There were so many different pieces that really stood out to me. The 3 points that Pastor, if you missed this week's message, by the way, go back and watch it. It's a great start to like what it's going to look like to show up in our relationships as the gospel would tell us to show up. And so I really want to encourage you to go watch it. But one of the points that he said was how well you show up in your relationship with others is an indication of how well you are showing up with God. And I was like, well, that's true, right? Because like, I want to show up with people from the overflow of what the Lord's done in my life. But if I'm not showing up with the Lord and I'm not like in those moments with him, for sure, I don't show up that way. Our relationships matter to God. We need to, like, all the different things. Our relationships matter to God because this is the mechanism through which the Lord is going to use to change the world. And you can't do Christianity alone. Man, we learned that, especially this past year, we learned that. You literally can't do Christianity alone. And whether you're in-person community, your online community, we're still called a community. So whatever that community looks like for people, I think is so important. The piece that I like underlined was that we're never done loving our neighbors. I think sometimes we put an expiration on relationships when they get hard, and we don't actually get to wash our hands of people because things get hard. The Lord calls us especially into those hard moments. I think that's a refining time for us, but it's also a refining time for relationships. And Jesus has loved us conditionally and so unconditionally, so we actually get to show people unconditional love. And I think we can easily make excuses for why we don't want to be with the difficult people in our life, our difficult neighbor, the difficult family member. But I think the Lord calls us time and time again to step up in those relationships and show the love of Jesus. And then, we can win them over, I think, for Jesus.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the case. But it was a great message. The end, we had a prayer moment. If you were in person with us, you got to experience just a time of prayer. And we haven't, that's one of the things in the pandemic I think we've missed the most is just like those personal interactions with people. We as pastors would go to hospitals and pray with people. We would go to people's homes and pray with people. And the pandemic kind of distance us from that. And so this past weekend, we actually got moments where we actually got to hear what people were walking through. We got to pray with people. And so it was just such a practical application of just showing the love of Jesus to people. And so I loved this past weekend. I'm super excited for this next coming weekend and what the Lord's going to do in this message. It's a powerful series as we learn what it looks like to be in relationships.
Well, I ironically hovered in on the same first thought that you got. And as we move into a time tonight where we're going to push on this a little bit, we're going to push on the concept of how I show up for others is how I show up for God. It just is the truth. Jesus is teaching, and at one point he says, if you're on your way to the temple to present your sacrifice and you remember that someone has something against you, there's something in between you and someone else, leave your gift at the altar, don't give it, go back to the person, take care of it, and then come back and finish your sacrifice. I don't think we take that very seriously.
No.
Because we leave a trail online of things that we leave in between us and other people. And then we just rush back into God's presence. And that's the inverse of what he's asked, right? So if my wife, who is the most important relationship in my life, if she's asked me to be careful in a relationship that honors her, right? Like I'm careful in my relationship with other women. And if there's another woman that doesn't make her feel safe, she lets me know and I honor that. Okay, well, how crazy would this be? She lets me know and I blow that concern off and I continue to interact with that relationship that doesn't make her feel safe. Where are we at as a culture when Jesus says, if there's something in between you and someone else, take care of that, then come back to your relationship with me? That was ringing in my head this weekend as Ricky was teaching, particularly that concept. How I show up for others is how I show up for God. It's it's not this winsome concept that my preacher preached. It weighs on me. And so I want to hover on that in a few different ways tonight. We'll talk about the Good Samaritan, and then we will also talk about the Derek Chauvin trial, because I think there's a great implication we can pull from this for that in our culture. So one of the phrases that Ricky used to explain or parse out how we can be relating to others and God, this whole horizontal dynamic, is this. God doesn't need my good deeds because God's work saved me. The finished work of Christ on the cross saved me, so therefore my good deeds don't outpace his. But my neighbor does need my good deeds. So I started to think through, where do we want good to go? And I think a lot of times we want God to give us good, and then we want to keep good. We don't want to keep it moving. And then I will really easily find fault with you or whoever you are, not you obviously, but whoever you are, and then I'm going to point out the bad in you. So it's not just that there are some believers that might have a misunderstanding that, oh, I got to do good deeds so that God loves me. We want God to give us good, and we stop it from moving to others. So we're stopping God's economy. And good Lord, if there's ever been a year where we understand what happens when an economy gets stopped and all the fallout from that, so that then the government has to step in and dump thousands of billions of dollars on top of it. If you don't understand what $1.9 trillion is, make $1 billion this year and then do it for the next 1,899 years without failing. And then you've caught up to what the government did so that we don't stop the flow of economy. And now believers, we have an eternal calling on our life to not stop the flow of God's economy where he's given us good, and now we give that good to others. So the concept that Ricky dropped on us isn't just quotable, but it's functional. God doesn't need my good deeds, but my neighbor does. And I think he was quoting Spurgeon when he said it, right?
Yeah, he was. And that was such a... Didn't that, like, man, as soon as he said it, I was like, yes, it's true.
Yeah. And so now it not just illuminates the direction that it should go, but the motivation for it. And that's also now a second step I want to take as we unpack that concept is I tend to have conviction and anger about the sin of others and compassion for myself. So that to me just mirrors this same concept that I want God's goodness to stop in me and I keep it rather than move it on. And then in others, I'm like, oh, you go figure it out yourself. I think believers have that same problem that we're so caught up with the sins of others and we excuse ours. I think it's just that same like Dead Sea mentality where I only want good in me and I don't want good for others. And so is it any surprise that the church is not advancing into culture, that this opportunity for my neighbor to see good deeds and then be compelled through me back to God, the great check writer of the divine economy. Well, I should have conviction for my sin and compassion for others, right? So we just need to invert a lot of relationships right now because our culture is begging us, daring us, taunting us, shaming us into consistently fault finding and enemy labeling, right?
Yep.
And so if the fault is yours and you are the enemy, of course I don't want my good deeds to motivate you because I'm mad at you for reasons that mainstream media has told me, that my Facebook feed has reinforced to me. And so rather than turn you into an object like, oh, you'd be the perfect person for God's good will to be demonstrated to, I'm like, oh, you're the perfect person to protect myself from, find fault in you, overlook my own sin, and trap God's goodness within me. And I'm telling you right now, you're going to get poisoned if you're doing that because it's like when God sent the manna to the Israelites, he would tell them, hey, go out and collect enough for yourself today and trust me for tomorrow. And if you collect any more than you need today, it will rot overnight. And I think we've got a lot of Christians right now that want God's goodness, hashtag blessed. Like, I want that. And if we don't move it through, I'm telling you right now, it's going to rot and it's going to corrode your view of what God's grace is supposed to be doing.
So good.
So, okay. So that's a little bit about that concept. That God doesn't need my good deeds, but my neighbor does. I cannot tell you how thickly that needs to infect our motivation, our thinking, our application as a generation of believers. And so what now we do is, okay, I overlook my sin and I'm mad about yours. Now the best tool at my disposal is no longer grace. It's no longer the gospel. It actually is legislation. It is laws. It is politics because those are confining legalities where I'm going to wall you off and I'm going to label this as this. And don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-politics. I've been involved as an engaged voter since the first election I was legally allowed to be a part of. To this day. Shush, okay? I'm not that much older than you. But let's just say I'm closer to that 100 years old than you are. And so with this inversion, one of the great poisons of trapping grace in us and not extending our good deeds for others to see God is, okay, I'm mad at you, I'm going to overlook myself, and I'm just going to keep turning to politics to solve the evils of the day rather than wanting God's grace to flow into the evils of the day. And God's grace can flow into the evils of the day and redeem them. God's grace doesn't govern the evils of the day, it redeems them, and those hearts and minds are transformed. And so we can either keep trying to legislate a righteous attitude, which, by the way, we should absolutely be engaged and informed civic members of society that vote good, orderly, but it's not my hope. It's something that I participate in, but what I'm passionate about is the flow of God's grace into me and then through me. And that's like a foundational thing that if our generation of faith doesn't get it, faith will die out with us. 100%. It just will. So just like the law, the New Testament speaks about what the Old Testament law did. And when the Bible talks about the Old Testament law, it's all 5 first books of your Old Testament. It's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, okay? And this is where God explains how we ought to live with each other. And then you start to flip through, and Joshua, Judges, Ruth, you got 1st, 2nd Samuel, 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Chronicles. All of these books now start to analyze how were they handling that law. Big shocker, they didn't handle it great. And so the New Testament says that the law taught us about sin, but grace comes through Jesus. So great. If we want to just say, okay, I'm just going to keep getting mad at you and only wanting good for myself, and I'll just turn to politics or legislation to change the world. The Bible says that what the law is good at is teaching me that I've got sin and that grace and mercy come through Jesus. So even the Bible acknowledges that you can employ law to try and get righteousness in the world, but the best thing it's good for is to teach me my need for Christ. That's the number one thing it can do for me.
So good.
So if we're struggling with people in our lives who have sin, we give them grace, not judgment. God doesn't need my good deeds because my neighbor does. Okay?
So good.
So that's some of that. Now, we're going to start to pivot away towards the Good Samaritan, but This makes sense in my head, Nat. It might not make sense in the real world.
Okay.
I'm acknowledging it.
Throw it out there.
I've
Let's
got
see.
it written down, so just in case it goes way off course, I can read. So back in ye olden times, when America was trying to establish itself as a culture, okay, apart from England, they're in the New World, and they're trying to figure out who they are and how they're different from that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because England has centuries of like civility and rules.
Yeah.
Americans were kind of this upstart, plucky, like, well, we could invent a new way of doing things. So Ben Franklin was one of those out-of-the-box thinkers in American culture.
Yeah.
Really different way at looking at things, and I think he thrived in the New World. He said, if somebody new moves to a small community, the community should not rush to do things for them. Actually, they should get together and figure out, hey, which of us has a broken fence? Let's go ask the new neighbor to help us mend our fence. And everyone's like, well, why? We want them to know that they're welcome and that we're here for them. And he's like, yeah, but then they feel like they're starting off in a hole. The best way for them to feel like they have value in this community is to give value to the community. So we go and ask a new neighbor for help. Can you please come help me with my fence? Can you come please help me with my well? I don't know what else in the olden days they had other than fences and wells. Me oxen, sheep are up on yonder hill. I don't know, right? Like, please help me retrieve my bow staff. That was one too far. Now I'm laughing at myself.
Staff. You went off. Go to your
Nunchuck
notes.
skills. I go back to the notes.
Go to your notes.
But so
Nunchuck
right.
skills.
I know. Sorry.
That was said out loud.
It was.
Notes.
So someone new in town should be asked for help, not given it, because this makes them feel like a legitimate piece of the community sooner than later, and it helps them feel like they belong. Service is at the ground level of building community, serving others, right? And service gives value to the other person, but serving makes me valuable to you. And so Ben Franklin isn't seeing it from a gospel perspective, but what he extracts from that illustration is if that brand new person shows up and the first thing they do is help me, now they feel like I'm a value giver.
Yeah.
Wow, I belong here a lot more quickly. And again, it's antithetical to what culture wants to do is I just want to trap and keep value and not share with anyone else. But the idea that, as Ricky started to talk about then serving others, and that's what's going to leak us into the Good Samaritan is how he showed up to serve.
Yeah.
Service is at the ground level, the foundation of building community. So as Ricky talks about horizontal relationships as a whole, service gives value to the other person, which then, watch this, makes me valuable to them. And it's not even that I become more important than God. That's bad theology and it's bad practice. But what it does is it starts to show us through the eyes of even culture that they understand that there's a healthy way of building community. There's a healthy way of building relationships that's a little bit better than our persistently divisive culture that we're living in right now. And so while I am constantly bombarded by a divisive culture, it's actually really encouraging because as I try and show my kids the wonders of nature. Like I've driven them to the tallest tree in North America. They're like, this is so lame. Why are we going to this? And then you get them there and they're like, actually, low-key, this is kind of cool. That's a crazy big tree,
Can you
right?
take a picture for my Instagram?
Yeah, let me take a picture. As you're like, hey, I want you guys to see Yellowstone. Like, why are we going to drive 30 billion hours to get to you? And then you get them there and they're like, actually, this is pretty freaking awesome. And like, hey, I want to take you to the Grand Canyon. Well, it's a big hole. And then you take, like, holy cow, this is incredible.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. You got to get out of all the mess of the city to show your kids really incredible things. The generation we live in is busy and confusing and distracting. Believers, you get a chance with this series to separate yourself from the busyness of this culture and show our community really amazing things. And so this random idea of Ben Franklin giving people advice like, hey, draw value out of them so that they are creating community a lot faster. I think that's good advice for Christians to say into a culture that is constantly arguing, just provide value to it. Go be of service to it, and you'll be so radically different than the busyness and the anger of a divided culture. It's, man, God
Isn't it harder, though? Like, I feel like it's easier to serve someone than it is to even ask. Like, I feel like that's a safety, because that's safe. I can serve when I want to serve. I can choose what I want to do, but to invite someone into your place to give them value, that's like way harder.
Yeah.
So I think that's why that's even more important, especially in today's self-centered society, is that we would say, if it serves me, I'll serve you. And that's totally opposite.
Yeah.
His mindset was, no, it's going to give them value so they don't feel like
they're an outsider.
They have to owe forever too.
Yeah.
It brings them in.
Yeah.
So good.
God doesn't need my good deeds, but my neighbor does.
Yeah.
Okay, so then let's now talk about the Good Samaritan, because the Good Samaritan is very easily a story about a man who decides to serve someone else, right? That's that, like, ooh, I'll take from what I have, and this dude has even less. If you don't remember the story, he was robbed, stripped naked, beaten. So literally, like, nothing. He's got nothing. Yeah. So anything the Good Samaritan provides him is a step up, forward. He clothes him, puts him on his donkey, takes him to a Medipost urgent care clinic, and pays for penicillin and some bandages, Pedialyte, and then 2 nights in a local hotel. And he tells the hotel owner, hey, I've got an open tab over here at the Medipost. He's got penicillin. I'm just going to leave you this credit card in an envelope. Mail it back to me when you're done. But this dude shouldn't leave the motel until he's healed. Like, don't kick him out after 2 days. Yeah. Let him go when he's healed. Okay, wow, that's a striking story about service. Yeah. But there's a wrinkle there that eventually we're going to get to the Derek Chauvin trial and how our culture is handling all of this right now. Labels that Jesus used in that story were actually an even bigger deal about the audacity of serving somebody, because Jesus used the labels. There was an Israelite got beaten and robbed, okay? And then a priest passed by and a Levite passed by, okay? I am so sorry, because I'm about to mess with your Wednesday night, but you are living in one of the premier seasons in American history to understand how inflammatory these labels are. Sorry, y'all, I'm about to use some labels. Let's pluck some labels from American culture right now that are designed to make you angry. I'm not wanting to make you angry, but mainstream media sure does. So this is a MAGA dude, okay? And the MAGA dude gets beat, and he's stripped and left on the roadside, okay? And then 2 dudes pass by in red baseball caps, and neither one of them helps him. And then someone shows up in a BLM t-shirt. You're nervous right now. You're like, Tim, why are you using these, bro? I'm here for a Bible study. What are you doing? I'm telling you, if you're not reading the Good Samaritan, picking up on the labels of Israelite, priest, Levite, and Samaritan, you're missing the craziest part of this story. Yep. The craziest part of this story is actually a response. Jesus was challenged at the beginning. Go back in Luke and read the beginning of this parable. Who is my neighbor? And Jesus is like, I'd love to talk with you about who your neighbor is. Because the culture that Jesus lived in had a bunch of labels that they used to describe who you like and who you don't like. And it's super easy in our culture right now for me to bring up 2 labels that describe massive swaths of culture, and you probably like one of those 2, and you probably don't like one of those 2. And Jesus' point is either way. I could use the labels the other way. A BLM person got robbed and left behind, and 2 BLM shirts pass by, and a MAGA hat shows up. It works both ways. I'm not giving value to one side or the other. The point of the parable is very incendiary labels existed in culture. And so Jesus is like, great, let me use your labels on how you identify who's an enemy and who's not. And I'll tell you who your neighbor is. And then at the very end of the parable, Jesus looks back at the person and he says, who acted like a neighbor in the parable? And the person that challenged Jesus in the beginning, he was like, he couldn't even say the Samaritan. He couldn't say it. And so if you tend to be liberal in America, it would be so hard for you to say that a MAGA person is a hero. It just would be, because the media that you watch makes MAGA the enemy. If you're conservative in this culture, it would be so hard for you to say that a BLM person could possibly be a hero. They're anarchists, right? Like, well, that's what the media says. So this person in the Good Samaritan can't even use the label to tell Jesus who the hero was. But he does define what the good neighbor was. And he's the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus says, great, go and do likewise. And I just can't help but think about a culture where I could bring up other names of people,
it's so easy to come up, right? With, we just can look at, on any given day, depending on what's going on, you can pick two different camps where people are going to fall.
Yeah. CNN has their list of bad guys. They just do. In the newsroom, when they're prepping stories, they're like, what bad guy can we use today that'll make our base angry and feel good about themselves?
Yeah.
Fox News does the same thing. They've got a list of bad guys, right? Yeah. And they use them to, advance what they're trying to do. That's fine. That's their job. Yeah. But the job of the Christian, when we sit in this culture, as Ricky begins a series on relationships, I'm telling you, Nat, it weighs on me. How we show up for others reflects how we're showing up for God. So and we're living in a culture that begs us to pick winners and losers, heroes and enemies. Yes, I'm for you, and yes, I'm against you. Yeah. And Jesus just sat in the story, and he's like, man, I'm going to tell you how different people acted. I'll use some labels, but you tell me who's acting heroic. And it's the person who showed compassion. So hopefully now the Ben Franklin thing even makes a little bit more sense, that the way we can show up in a culture that doesn't understand healthy relationship, the way we can show up in a culture that doesn't understand how can the gospel live right now, it either has to pick liberal or conservative. Can the gospel really sit above it? It absolutely can, because it's wiser than both of those camps. And what it does in this moment is it just treats people like people. So that's my point that I want to get to with the jury case this week. I, in no way, shape, or form, think that this is the right time and place for me to weigh in on the justice system in America. Here's what I did, Nat. I'm watching all of this unfold, just like all of us, right? And I know in my mind, I'm working really hard to refuse to let people force me to identify somebody in my country as an enemy. I just don't want to do it. But what do I do? Nothing? Maybe that's better than being inflammatory and divisive. But here's what I did. Over the course of this week, I reached out to individual people. There are people in my life who are Black, and I just reached out to them. I affirmed, hey, I love you. How's your week going? And then, by the way, God loves you too. And then there are people in my life who are cops, policemen who have got character through the roof. I reached out to them and I let them know, I love you. God loves you. And how are you doing? And so what I did is I treated those groups like a person. And then I knew that through me, I had to be courageous. It feels awkward sometimes when you're a white person reaching out to a Black person in a moment of tension saying, hey, by the way, I love you and God loves you. Like, hey, this is weird. What do I do with my hands? Right? Like, it just feels awkward.
Yes, it does.
But what you can do is just be a good neighbor. And then my buddies who are cops, I cannot tell you, the men in my life who are on the police force have some of the strongest character I know. And I'm not saying that that's everybody. I'm just saying I trust those men, and I wanted to reach out to them. And so what God did through my life this week was treat people like individuals. And that's really what I would encourage us this week is, as Ricky is pushing us into this series, man, that phrase has got to do something in us, that how I show up for relationships with people reflects how I'm showing up in my relationship with God. God sees all of me, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and he treats me like an individual. He treats me with grace, and he wants good for me. And then he's asking me to move good through me to others. And so what I did this week with the trial is I found individuals and I treated them graciously. I treated them like people, and I wanted them to know that God's love was for them, to them, and on them. Because in culture, everyone's an enemy. And I just don't think that's what the gospel witness shows up for.
Yeah, so good.
So 3 thoughts I've got as we close my time tonight and as we move into other things. This concept that weighs on me, my relationship with others, is all about the reflection and reality of God's relationship with me. That means it honors God most when I relate like him. That's my best way to honor God. The second thing is it develops me most when I relate like God. Like, I have a more eternal mindset for cultural flashpoints, which guides me through cultural flashpoints. It honors God most, it develops me most, and it reaches them most. And so it's best for God's glory, it's best for my development and discipleship, and it's best for the redemption of an unbelieving culture. And so because those things are true, you've got to tune into this series. You've got to let it, like, not something that you like, but something that you live, okay? And that's what I've got.
And I feel like, man, you said a pretty profound thing, which was like, it's uncomfortable to enter in some of those conversations, right? Like you don't know where to enter into those conversations. And I think that this whole series is going to be about that. How do we enter into those uncomfortable places from a biblical perspective, but also in a safe place? Like I have safe relationships in my life that are teaching me how to enter into those places and say, man, I'm going to mess up. I'm not always going to get this right. But like when they know your heart, right? So those people know your heart. And your heart is, man, I just want to show you love. I don't know how to step into this. I've never felt X, Y, and Z, whatever those emotions are. And I think that when they can see you as just a person saying, hey, I don't want to fight. I just want to love you.
Yeah.
It's so profound. So I think this whole series is going to be great. It's going to teach us all the things.
Well, and even the first question that's up on our screen right now is a great question. How do you show love to others in these times when they're just trying to push their point in debate? I hope this doesn't come across flippant, but the easiest way I can quickly explain it is my boys are older now. They're like in college and finishing high school. My daughters are young. My daughters are young enough now that the things that they can think of is their whole world. And so sometimes they'll ask me, like for a treat, like, hey Dad, am I allowed to have some of the chocolate chips in the cupboard? Because they just want a treat, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, can I do that? I'm like, no, I don't think you should do that because Mom and I are going to take you guys out tonight and we'd actually like to get you, a Pizookie at BJ's or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I know a better option than my daughter knows.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I will not enter into what she's got in her world of good options.
Yeah.
I'll introduce a second.
Yeah.
And my answer, let this just sit on you because we can't talk about it forever. How do you show love to others in these times when they're just trying to push their point in debate? Our whole culture only has inferior options to argue with. And I think it's very appropriate for you to say, you know what? I know those are the options you see. I just see an eternal perspective where I see value in you. And so I want you to have value.
Well, and Pastor Ricky talked about that this weekend. We'll say things online that we would never say to someone's face. And so I would say if you're passionate enough, like if this is really someone that you're in an intentional relationship with and you love them enough to get into a conversation where you think like you feel like it's maybe going to turn into a debate, do it face to face. Pick up the phone, meet them for lunch, meet them for coffee. Sometimes we take things out of context because it's online. We're also way braver and crueler online than we would ever be to someone's face. And a lot of times you don't know the backstory of why they're fighting so hard for the thing they're fighting for. And so I'm always looking at it from the perspective of, man, we walk into each and every day with some sort of baggage.
Yeah, everybody's carrying a weight.
Everybody's carrying a weight. And we don't know what that weight is. Like what is one weight for some person is not a weight for the other person. And if you can't sit at a table, if you can't sit across from the person and say the same exact thing that you're going to say online, don't say the thing online. If you're not going to say it to their face, don't say it online. Yeah. So many brave people. I mean, literally so many brave people online. So as a believer, whether you're talking online or I get so amped because I'm just like, you would never say that to my face. Say it to my face. Yeah. But that's, as believers, we're called to intentional relationships, and online does not create a space for that in that manner. And most of the time, I would say those pushing point in debate, I would say you probably are trying to push points too. At the end of the day, we all have some objective. And what if your objective was just to show mercy? Why do you have to have that such a strong opinion about that thing? So I think there's a lot of different ways that we can address that, but for sure.
Yeah, I think it's just one of the, I'll re-clarify my funky illustration again. My kids have very limited view of the options they think they have at hand. And as a parent, I know I've got more. And sometimes when my kids just want to talk through two terrible options, I introduce a better. And so what I would say in this culture is I just keep trying to tell people, I did not use the court case this week to turn every cop into a bad guy. I did not use the court case this week to turn every black person into a bad guy. I decided there are some black people in my life I know and love that are probably having a week, and there are some cops in my life that are probably having a week, and I am going to show up in grace for them. Yeah. That's what I did.
And and our world would look so different if we took that standpoint. If we just started to show up and just love those people in our love anyone in our love just the people that God's placed in our life. So
well, and here's what's funny too is some of the people on either side of this interaction with, like, they love each other too.
Oh, 100%.
Right? And so it's
100%. The media wants to portray a picture, right? A totally different picture. And so I'm always like, turn it off. My husband loves the news. We watch it he's just the guy. He wants to watch the news every night.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, I can't handle it anymore. Please turn it off. It's so depressing.
Yeah.
But, you're right. It's fear. And people live in a world of fear. And when you're afraid, then you just lock up. And that's where I see a lot of us not being able to show up in love. This was good. This was really good.
I'm excited because, don't get me wrong, the pandemic and the economy and health and all of those things, an enormous weight on our country, culture, and the world.
Yeah.
But man, as we move back out of that, we were not doing well relationally for years heading into this.
Yep.
And this exasperated it. So there cannot be a better series to move us as Southern California's, ekes towards open in schools and sports and all of these environments where relationships should be happening rather than in Facebook arguments. We need to be equipped for them well.
Yeah.
So,
and this coming week, we're going to be talking about familying like Jesus. So that'll be really good. So guys, invite your friends, invite your families. It's such just a profound way for us to show up for our community through this series. It's just a safe place for people to show up. And we want to be a safe church for people to wrestle through what this looks like. We know that not everybody's situations are the same. And so we want to be a safe place for people to show up and heal through their relationships, but also help heal relationships in their life. So,
well, we hope you guys have enjoyed this tonight. Last week, Nat unfortunately did not get to close us out with the Aaronic blessing.
I have to say something before the Aaronic blessing.
Oh, really?
Yes.
What is it?
We need to talk about Love Local one more time. Dan's the boss of us, and he sent us a message.
Oh. Okay.
Love Local. Don't forget. Register today. It's going to be
absolutely incredible. We don't even need that, Dan.
Dan, we don't need the card. He had a cue card for Tim in case he needed to do it. But I will pray the blessing out on you guys. I messed up last week, and y'all, it cut. After that, my mom scolded me for making fun of Tim, and then it cut out on me. I had to apologize to Tim. All right. May the Lord bless you and keep you.